Hello and welcome. The James Gunn, Peter Safran DCU is nearing its live-action debut with Gunn's Superman movie. We've had leaked photos, a couple versions of a teaser, a behind-the-scenes short, and finally multiple trailers as I record this. And the YouTube nerd contingent has been all over them, naturally, pretty thoroughly for the most part. But of course, I've got my own speculation, spoilers, and suggestions. Don't I always? This is going to stretch the boundaries of long form, even for me, beginning with a couple of additional disclaimers / caveats. First, I've been speculating on this project since Gunn's initial first slate announcement, and while a fair number of those theories were pretty thoroughly dismissed since, I'm still so pleased with a few that I'm going to mention them here anyway, as a warning shot for an upcoming new series here. Headcanon. Second, it's become increasingly obvious that the order in which the various trailers are presenting scenes is not the chronological sequence of the film itself. Combining that with the re-editing which Gunn confirmed occurred after test screenings, any speculations on a specific cause and effect relationship between most of these situations are going to be shots in the dark for any of us YouTube nerds. Disclaimers in place. Fasten your seatbelts. This ride goes all over the place. So very early on, when the leaked set photos had a certain subset, belly aching about the designs of the film, I had a thought that explained it. A thought which, while I still think is cool, was entirely unnecessary, either as explanation or defense. The film and the DCU library going forward are simply embracing their comic book source, finally. Anyhow, my no-prize submission at that time was, what if the entire portion of the film from which we had gotten released stills was of a parent reading to their child a newspaper account by Lois of the events? What's been revealed to us so far is just a kid's imagined version. We see, after the conclusion of the told tale, how Superman inspires hope, while in real life we see that it truly is a never-ending battle. Possibly even having a character, I'm thinking Lois, use that exact expression. These more serious real-world DCU aspects will look entirely different and have been kept under wraps for that very reason. I admit that's a stretch even for one of my speculations, but when it occurred to me, I ran the theory past some folks who thought it sounded cool too. Okay, it was my husband and our nephew, but they're both adult nerds with valid opinions. Seriously, though, while the specific take might be unique, it isn't as if Gunn has never told stories within stories before. Yes, flashbacks count. However, well, I still haven't gotten around to reading Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, but I will. I understand that that story is told from the viewpoint of a different character, and the trope could get redundant. And again, I'm stoked that we're getting a fully realized comic book reality instead. Making a polar shift, pun intended. While staying on the subject of that comic book reality, it's intriguing to me that with the amount of similarly comic-based action being shared, shoveled at this point, to be honest, Gunn is also pretty obviously using this film to lay out the politico-economic background of the DCU. Beyond main villain Lex Luthor being the post-crisis billionaire tech bro version, we are at least also getting Maxwell Lord and the acknowledged existence, if not appearance, of Simon Stagg. All three with their own ubiquitous multinational corporations, plus their own metahuman agents. These agents seem to be variously employees private contractors, branded publicity stunt teams, or a combination of those, plus family. Luthor's two metamuscle hench beings seem to be black ops, both in action and appearance, but those aren't necessarily uniforms. The engineer is an odd fit with Luthor, based on her comic canon background, which I'll circle back to later. But the DCU isn't a direct copy of that comic book world. Earth 1, Earth Prime, whatever this week's cosmic reboot has left it as. The other is, at least until the first public showings of the movie, being called Ultraman. And as that suggests, he requires his very own speculation. Before that, though, I have to mention that these two fight and apprehend Superman seemingly under the orders of, or in cooperation with, General Rick Flag Sr. It's not clear what this means regarding the government's policy on metahumans, what exactly the jurisdiction and purview are of Argus in the DCU, or the status of Task Force M. But it does give an eerily current IRL take on the relationship between the government and big business. The Lord Tech Justice Gang, proving my immediate speculation that there will be no mention nor appearance of a Justice League for years, are all branded and probably trademarked with the corporate sponsor's logo instead of the usual individualistic sigil. Stag Industries, in comics at any rate, acquires their metahuman accidentally through an attempted murder fail. Look that up for yourselves, but in the long run, Rex Mason, aka Metamorpho, ends up as Simon Stagg's son-in-law, with baby Joey soon to follow in comics, the movie, and this video. So Rex is sort of a bonus for the company, possibly acting for the most part of his own free will. But again, baby Joey. So tangentially, IMDb also indicates the appearance of the Farr twins, Desmond and Dean, who in comic continuity are both old money and metahumans. You have to wait and see how they're presented in the DCU. There are still many more characters being introduced in the film. The idea that this is problematic is mainly being spewed by that same subset of squeaky wheels. This is BS. Besides the Oppenheimer comparison Gunn himself made, genre fans have only to consider, in retrospect preferably, that other umbrella franchise, Harry Potter. Those films had sprawling casts, and as I recall, fans of the books complained about the film's editing down. Following through with this shared universe's characters, the other wild card here is the enigmatic Hammer of Baravia. One theory is that this is simply an early iteration of the continuingly mysterious Ultraman, but that's way too simple for me to accept. My first thought on this powerhouse was, Superman movie, armored character, the word hammer right in the name? Obviously, John Henry Irons, aka Steel. Then I got more and better views of the figure in action, which I immediately grabbed in screenshots. First, to the fan theorists claiming based on the armor and the Euro-Russo sound of Baravia, that this is the eventual Justice League International member Rocket Red? Nah. First, the colors are off. Who is seeing this as silver and red? You need to adjust your settings. Second, the landscape and populace of Baravia don't look to be that far north, nor even close enough to encourage annexation. There could be other in-story factors so far undisclosed that would make it profitable, but I'm still not sold. I also don't believe the Hammer's armor is a version of the Lexo suit, but I do believe Lex is involved with the Hammer. I think Lex has business interests in Baravia, and after Superman's intervention there, he uses the Hammer in Metropolis to inflame and exaggerate public opinion against Superman. I doubt that the Hammer is even native to Baravia, and that the full nationalistic name's simply invented by Luthor. See, after noticing the colors and details of the armor, I gave a thorough squint at my stills of the fight and flight scenes, and I noticed something that I haven't heard anyone else point out. The hammer is always shown accompanied by a small fleet of drones, which bear a strong resemblance to the hammer's helmet. A somewhat squashed dome with a slit, providing visibility, one would assume, for the hammer, and sensor array in the drones. The escort devices also have projecting structures on the sides, probably for propulsion and stability. The drones reminded me of something else. Some things else, in fact. The two different ideas conflicted and confused me at first, then combined to make perfect sense as soon as I remembered Gunn's announcement of the first slate of the DCU. See, the swarming multiple devices threw me at first. That seemed like the behavior of Mr. Terrific's T-spheres. Surely they weren't going to give him a bait-and-switch origin. Then the original slate list came to mind, and I recognized why the hammer's actual color scheme seemed familiar. I'm saying that the hammer of Baravia is the one, the only, Booster Gold. Now, hear me out. While James Gunn has been forthcoming about issues with some initial DCU projects, he has also said how connected a world the DCU will be. Booster was one of the first characters announced to be getting their own show. Even though that's been delayed, there's nothing to prevent Gunn from introducing the character earlier. Booster could easily have access to even more advanced versions of the T-Tech. In fact, advanced tech is his thing. Even though in comics continuity, this version of Mr. Terrific debuted years later, Booster still comes from the future of that internal chronology. Likewise, Booster's long-standing, if complicated, assistant sidekick / partner, Skeets, makes even more sense as an evolution of T-sphere technology. Whether he is the sole survivor of this drone fleet or spread into a network, not sure how that'll play out. Although I do believe that either these drones or the T-spheres are going to be the in-story reason for that Luthor Corp goon's knocked out teeth bouncing off a camera lens. Also, given Booster's trademark for promoting trademarks, he would fit right into the big business maneuvers being set up in the DCU. And he's also especially known for the same color scheme as the hammer, blue and gold. His costume even has the star emblem. As for motivation, well, Booster, in multiple first appearances, has wanted to make a name for himself by besting Superman. If not that, there's the potential for him being telepathically controlled. We've already seen Grodd in Creature Commandos. Or there's also set photos showing a mysterious apparent extraterrestrial that could be a white Martian. Now, making Booster actually formidable enough to whoop Superman is a bit of a surprise, but so is his inclusion in the first slate list. Maybe Gunn feels it's about time that Gold gets to shine. Now, Metamorpho, despite his own quirky continuity, has a plotline that seems more straightforward. He works for Simon Stagg, he marries Sapphire Stagg, he's the father of the equally odd but merchandisably adorable baby Joey. The last two being abducted by Luthor agents as leverage and possibly experimental subjects. That's why we initially see Superman being weakened by cellmate Metamorpho, who is using his elemental abilities to generate kryptonite. Later, Superman's shown keeping Joey safe, as Metamorpho corrals them and other former captives as the facility goes kaboom. Guessing that Sapphire and Superman talk Rex into defying Luthor, triggering the chaos. I'm betting the reason for Lex's gangster-style extortion against Metamorpho is because the physical composition of Rex's brain makes him immune to telepathy. And I think that multi-dimensional jailbreak is what causes the subsequent fault line collapsing through Metropolis. Meanwhile, we have to look over the awkwardly named Justice Gang. That moniker has to be a Guy Gardner brainstorm. For those of you who aren't familiar with the comics and have somehow avoided all publicity, Guy Gardner is, or at least was, a Green Lantern. Yeah, but with a regular costume, which is still just as off-putting as the CGI one. But that's just Guy, you know? Besides the power ring, his Kool-Aid orange bowl cut and the combination of sneer and scowl tell you everything else you need to know. It's almost impossible to tell you everything you need to know about Hawkgirl, since every version of her backstory is more convoluted than the last. There's ancient recurring reincarnation or extraterrestrial origins, plus star-crossed eternal love, tragic separation, or just buddy cop relationships with the inevitable Hawkman. Sometimes there are even two versions of her at the same time. The other going by Hawkwoman to, avoid confusion. Every version, though, is a winged warrior badass to the nth degree. Mr. Terrific might sound like a short-lived 60s superhero spoof character, but in DC Comics he's a legacy hero. Former Olympic decathlete and the third smartest person on Earth, whichever. He also has his own more benevolent multinational corporation, so we'll see how that works out in the movie. I expect, or at least hope, that he walks away from Lord Tech by the end. Gunn said in a recent interview that the Justice Gang members are willing to kill, but I hope that isn't a blanket policy. Mr. Terrific, Michael Holt, should be above that. I do know from the Season 2 trailer for Peacemaker that Guy and Hawkgirl stick with Max, but I believe Superman's going to have a pretty powerful positive influence on all of the other heroes. Wrapping up the character speculation with Lex's dynamic duo. This entire combination seems to make little sense at face value, but by applying my tangential speculative faculties, I can pound it into a workable theory. The confusion starts with the engineer. See, in comics, she has always been part of a larger team, more than just a duo. And that team's mission statement is totally counter to working with someone like Luthor. And even more counter to someone like the comics version of Ultraman. That Ultraman is a Superman variant from another universe where all of the counterparts to our heroes are villains and vice versa. Accent on vice. Besides the obvious reasons, this theory seems to be mostly proposed by fans of Henry Cavill, who want him to have a better send-off post-DCEU. Hence the mask for a big shock reveal. However, that's just one theory of who is actually inside that Zentai bodysuit. Some folks think the hidden hooligan is Bizarro, another anti-Superman with a long comic history, most recently being depicted as a failed clone of Big Blue with connections to Lex. That idea has more merit, especially with the cast discussion of a new character, Mr. Handsome, described by Gunn as a creature that Lex created in a petri dish. But I believe that character is narratively just a red herring. The interview comment wasn't intentionally distracting, just a spontaneous anecdote. Still, it is a role that ginormous nerd like Cavill might want to play. But no. I had jokingly thought from the movie character name of the offbeat and long-lost comic character Ultra the Multi-Alien. This idea came back to me a little more seriously when later trailers gave glimpses of what seems to be an unmasked and shaggy-haired Ultraman. But only a little more seriously. I'm still committed to my first real speculation about Ultraman's true identity. For that theory, I have to circle back to Ultraman's apparent partner, the Engineer. In her comics appearances, she's more of an anti-hero, bordering on hero, just more ruthless than even Batman without a Robin. Her team has pretty much the same by any means necessary attitude. Now, it so happens that team of hers was also part of the first slate list. The Authority is supposed to be getting their own theatrical film. With that piece in place, at least one member of the team is definitely able to go meta-humano a mano against Superman. He's kind of their star player. Now, hear me out. The Authority's golden boy, Apollo, is a Superman-level superhuman. Both he and Superman rely on solar radiation as a source of their powers. Supes specifically needs yellow sunlight. I believe Apollo isn't as finicky. The other differences with Apollo are that he weakens faster than Superman when cut off from direct solar exposure, and that his powers derive from channeling and redirecting the actual solar energy. These two factors would seem to make him a less effective opponent against the last son of Krypton. All Superman has to do is get Apollo in an enclosed, confined space, and Apollo runs his power down while potentially increasing Superman's. But what if the space-bending technology that seems to be used for the metahuman holding facility could be built into a suit? A suit that could channel solar radiation continuously to the wearer while keeping it insulated inside. It would need to be a full-body uniform to accomplish that. Not to mention that the Ultraman costume already mostly resembles the basic one worn by Apollo's husband, Midnighter. And every gay man knows one of the perks of a long-term relationship is potentially doubling your wardrobe. A drawback, or benefit, depending on whether you're the one inside the suit or the one who built it, is that the constant influx of power could effectively trigger an overdose. Now, given their die-hard, anti-establishment core philosophy, I'm still not sure what exactly the motivation for the engineer or any other member of the Authority could possibly be to cooperate with Luthor, outside of some type of mind control. But at least the engineer, if not both, would seem to be immune, for similar reasons to Metamorpho. But at least having both of Lex's hench entities be teammates already makes the motivation more reasonable. On that subject, Lex Luthor seems to be the big bad in this film, the hand guiding every conflict and calamity Kal-El confronts. And almost nothing seems to be beneath him. Whatever the mystery motivation for the engineer and Ultraman, he also manages to partner with the United States government, then, as shown by the Metamorpho and Baby Joey ploy, and reinforced by the released merch of Kaiju and Baby Kaiju. If persuasion or domination don't work, Lex will readily default to abduction and coercion. Hashtag Lex is the worst. Just thinking of those toy versions. The adult Kaiju has this feature: defeat the Kaiju and trigger the slime explosion. I hope in the film that doesn't result in the birth of Baby Kaiju. I think I might actually prefer the kidnapped baby as big version. So, this is quite a list of obstacles and opposition that Superman has to face in just this one movie. And I'm certain that it is not complete, but I'm also certain that it will be gratifying to watch him succeed. Not because he's overpowered, but because he never gives up. That's a lesson that's never out of date. And the timing couldn't be better. Can't wait to actually see the movie. And as usual, not worried one bit whether any of these speculations, spoilers, and suggestions are anywhere near the mark. Thanks for your time. Stop back again.